Okay, and you're listening to Hashem's podcast. Today we have a very special guest on our show, an opera singer. So let me tell you who he is. We have the Australian tenor voice teacher, composer, and stage director, Robert Mcfarlane, who enjoys a busy, multifaceted career in works from the late Renaissance to the present day. He studied at the Elder Conservatorium, HMT Leipzig, Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy, and was a young artist of the National Opera in Lyon. He was also a protege of the late great German tenor Peter Schreier. He has won numerous awards, including 2020 Bayreuth Young Artist Award from Wagner Society of Victoria. He holds a Bachelor's of Music with first class honours and will soon complete a Master's of Music Teaching at Victoria University. Robert made his role debut as Cavaradossi in Puccini's Tosca in November 2024, signalling an exciting new direction towards more dramatic repertoire. 2025 saw Robert continue his way with his debut as David in Wagner's Die Singer von Nürnberg for Melbourne Opera, and planned performances as Herod in Strauss's Salome in Asia and the UK. 2026, he will sing Pinkerton in Madame Butterfly in Hong Kong, Don Ottavio in Don Giovanni for Melbourne Opera, the title role in Gounod's Faust, Max in Freischütz, and Logue in Das Rheingold in Sydney, as well as return to Adelaide Symphony Orchestra as a soloist. So I'll stop talking right there. Welcome, Robert, to the show. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Hashem. Nice to be here.
Fantastic. So, Robert, you are in Hong Kong at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, just got to Hong Kong, just preparing, doing a bit of preparatory work here. Oh, well, not work actually, just study and sort of meetings for this Pinkerton in Madama Butterfly, one of the great Puccini tenor roles. So I'll be singing that here in April. So it's
Fantastic.
very exciting.
Can you tell us a little bit about your history, besides what I've just read out? And I've tried to pronounce every single thing as much as possible.
You did pretty well. You did pretty well.
Not too bad for an amateur. Tell us a little bit how you got into opera. How does one decide they want to, do the whole, I want to become an opera singer? How does that happen?
It's a good question. It's a very good question. And I used to think that my route was really a really strange one, but that the more I talk to other opera singers, the more common I think this story is. I think I had always sort of assumed that people came from, church choirs or very very classical music families. I actually came from rock bands, so
Wow.
my mum grew up with the boys from AC/DC, or fraternity as they
Oh,
were known in her
fantastic.
days. And so I was playing in pubs and
So
clubs.
Bon Scott.
Bon Scott, the
Oh,
great.
wow.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
absolutely.
Okay.
Um,
I actually knew someone who it was a roommate with Bon Scott in the 80s, and she said he was an absolute gentleman. He would finish a bottle of whiskey in a day, but he was an
yeah,
absolute gentleman. Yeah.
yeah, I believe that to be the case. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Fantastic.
so yeah, I was playing in pubs and clubs and things from about 13, 14 years old, and you know, going on regional tours
In the
in
bush,
Australia and things like
all
that.
around.
And
Yeah.
at some stage, somebody said, "Oh, look, you're singing all the time. You should go and have a singing lesson." And rock and roll people are very wary about training and lessons and all this kind of thing. But I did go, and this lovely old man, David Blight was his name. Um, Probably wasn't old then. I know. Sorry, David, if he's
Sorry,
a busy
David.
man. Yeah. He said, "Look, you could be an opera tenor. You've got this big, loud voice." And I sort of said, "Well, what's a tenor? It's more than a fiver." Um, so, um, but I fell in love with the music principally from the big stuff. Fell
So
in love with Wagner and Strauss and Verdi and Puccini and things like that when I
fantastic.
when I first heard
You
opera,
sound
and so that was the decision. Yeah,
excellent. You're very lucky because to find out your true sound, it takes years, doesn't it? Some people
absolutely.
start off as tenors and then they ended up becoming baritones, and some people are baritones and they end up becoming tenors as they get a bit older. And
Mm.
you can get some bad vocal teachers who tell you you're a baritone but you're a bass. All that sort of stuff happens. So that didn't happen with you?
Well, it did, yeah, it did. So when I was singing in rock bands and things like that, power was always my kind of forte. Forte was my forte, so to speak. And then uh, as often happens, somebody told me that I needed to sing lighter, to sing higher, sing sort of, and I basically worked out, at not knowing any better, I basically worked out a way of disconnecting my voice, and so I had quite a successful career in my 20s as a singer of mostly
Yep.
Baroque music and modern music, singing in a very light,
Lighter sound.
oh, this kind of very what I now call disconnected way,
Yep.
disconnected from the body.
Yep.
Uh, and when I got to 31 or 32, that method just stopped working. I couldn't
Oh,
sing high,
really?
I couldn't sing low. I
Okay.
I sort of thought, oh, okay, is
I've
this
lost it.
I've
So
lost it.
the transition from rock music, singing from the throat or your chest voice, and then
Yeah.
moving up to the resonator, up to your mask,
Mm,
or if you,
mm.
I don't know how you do it, but people call it the mask area, the pharynx. Stay away from the larynx, stay away from the throat. It's all up here.
Yes.
It's all up here. How did that happen for you?
Well, yeah, again, it was just this sort of I was sort of felt like I had to sort of catch up. So I guess I was listening to anything and everything, from big loud German opera, which I sort of always harbored a real love for, to Purcell, Monteverdi, all the early greats. Um, and I guess I just the sound I could imitate was that light English tenor sound when I was young. So I could sort of, yeah, as I said, sort of what I'd say, disconnect that sort of chesty voice that I'd been using, and start to sing almost solely in that high light voice. And when that ceased to work, I had to almost find my primal voice again, in my 30s, and which turned out to be more like a Puccini tenor, as you've heard. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a fantastic vocal trainer called Michael Trimble from the States. He was a tenor also, and he
Mm.
speaks about the human voice when you speak. It's the same technique when you sing. He called it the smile. Just have that Corelli smile, and
Yes,
the,
yes.
the sound just rises up naturally. Is that
Mm.
is that correct? That what we say, what we sing when we're singing an aria, is it the same as speaking, or does it change?
Well, in terms of if the few factors there for me, Hashem, um, it depends whether we're speaking well. I think a lot of people don't speak well, and so I think if we're speaking well, I think we can take more of that over to our singing voice, to our bel canto. If we're not speaking well, um, we need to look at both, of course. I guess the big thing with singing is that we're not stopping. If you imagine a single sentence like the one I've just said, there's probably 20, 30 small glottalizations. So this is the vocal cords coming apart, coming together, coming apart, coming together, coming apart to say these words. As a general rule in singing, uh, we're trying to keep them together for the entirety of a phrase.
Yep.
So I think what is difficult to learn in that, and what I guess is kind of the X factor, is how to sort of sustain that pressure that builds up when you're keeping your vocal cords together.
So how
Um,
does it work, Robert? Does it begin by taking a breath? It goes into the air goes into the lungs. The diaphragm pushes the air back up through the vocal
um,
folds. How does it work?
so yes, the vocal folds vibrate hundreds and hundreds of times a second, right? So I like to think of them almost as a dam or a door, and you've got a pressure, you've got the air in your body, which is causes a pressure moving upwards, and then because of the nature of acoustics, we've also got a pressure that resists that air, a pressure coming from sort of the source, I guess, if you call the source out in the room, back down. And what we're trying to do, I think, to keep this the vibration of the vocal cord really, really even, is to equalize those pressures. And so that's, I think, what the old Italians would call la lotta vocale, or the vocal contest. This idea of trying to equalize a pressure on either sides of the vocal cord so it can vibrate sort of unimpeded.
Yep.
I think that's the thing that is, I guess, especially in this larger repertoire, the hardest thing to manage. And I think that's the big difference between speaking and singing. Most of us, if we just take our primal sound, like a baby's cry,
Yep. Ah, okay.
most of us can make high sounds, low sounds, middle sounds.
Yep.
Sustaining them is the difficulty. So and it's mostly to do with maintaining that pressure and equalizing that pressure.
Yep. Could we compare the singing of opera to playing a guitar in terms of you need to pluck the strings vibrate, but you also need the acoustic body to make the sound. Without the acoustic body, you have no sound. So
Absolutely. With
the
with
sound,
the one crucial difference that we're building the guitar.
exactly. You're
Yeah.
building the guitar into. What about the idea of not listening to yourself and not hearing yourself while you're singing? The amateur versus the professional. The professional never hears himself or herself or themselves. They feel the sensation inside their body, inside their skull. It's not listening to your sound because you don't actually sound what you sound.
Mm,
The whole
mm,
sounds different. Is that is
yeah.
that is that correct?
Yeah. Look, I think that's the goal. I would say that most of us, even in the professional world, you know, there's an aspect that we listen to. There's a sort of a buzz or a ring that we're listening, that we do. There is an audio kind of feedback, but it's perhaps not the one that you might expect. Like we're not here, as you said, we're not hearing the voice as it is in a theater. So we have to get used to kind of listen, feeling in the majority of cases, but then also knowing that, for me, I almost sound hoarse in my own voice when it's right. And took a long time, this kind of rattle
Yep.
that I've heard a lot of, especially more dramatic singers talk about. Uh, I know it's kind of resonating freely when that occurs. Um, so I think we listen to certain things, but they're not beauty. It sounds as ugly as sin to my ears.
Wow. So
Yeah.
how many times has that happened where you've come off stage or after a performance and said, I've done a really, really bad job. It wasn't as good as I thought it was. And everyone's like, that was great, Robert. That was the most
Uh,
amazing thing I've ever heard.
quite often, quite often.
That's really good.
I think because we also feel, there's that old adage, Hashem, about, you get 80% of the result in 20% of the time. And as anybody in the arts or anybody doing a craft at a high level, we're obsessed with that last 20%. And, we lose our sleep over that last 20%. The audience doesn't necessarily care. I have the great opportunity to work with Uwe Grod and the Auckland Choral Society very regularly.
Wow.
And he's a wonderful, wonderful musician and a wonderful, wonderful colleague and friend. And I sang Handel's Messiah for them in December last year, and I was, unfortunately, I picked up a cold or flu on the plane.
Oh, no.
I could feel that something was in. I was impeded, but I did the vocal cords were okay, so I sang. Now, to me, it was pushing proverbial uphill. To everybody in the audience, they said, "Oh no, it sounded great. It sounded like
Yeah.
the rehearsal." So that 5%, that 6% that we kind of really obsess about is often inaudible in a theater or in a big venue.
Yeah, I definitely think we are definitely obsessed more than the audience cares. I mean, some of
Yes,
them
yeah,
come and
absolutely.
want to listen to the low F in Spada Fucile or something, but that's all they're there for. But all the other stuff that we think about, they're not really thinking about, are
Oh
they?
yes, yes,
No.
and I think we, especially if we think of theatre singing as opposed to singing for microphones and things like that, it's a
Yeah.
very different phenomenon. I the amount of times I've been on stage with colleagues who sing in very dramatic repertoire,
Yep.
and I thought, oh, they're almost, the voice sounded scratchy and forced, or there's some kind of strange color to it. And then I go and sit at the back of the hall, and all you're getting is that thick, column of sound.
Yep.
The
You need to be all the way back to hear it
Yeah,
properly.
exactly. So
Yep.
the little fine things that we obsess about now, because we've got microphones generally stuffed in our mouth all the time,
Yep.
as a theater phenomenon, they're not really audible. And so I think that's changed the nature of opera singing quite a lot.
Yep.
I'm a huge fan of Mario Del Monaco, and you
Yes.
watch those.
I was going to mention Mario. Yeah. Yeah. And
Oh,
I was going to mention
good.
Mario and Mario
He's
Lanza too, if
Oh,
you have an
excellent,
opinion about
excellent.
Mario Lanza.
Yeah, but the brass bull of Milan. Um,
The
but
pinup
you
boy,
watch
yeah.
those recording sessions from the late 40s, early 50s, and the microphone is about, half a soccer pitch away from him, so you're just getting the mass effect,
Yep.
uh, which is totally different to when you put a microphone,
Oh
six
yeah.
to 8 inches away from somebody. You're getting all the kind of uh, condensation of strange harmonics that is an opera singer's lot,
Yep.
right, funneled right into the microphone. So for me, it's two completely different things.
Yeah, fantastic. So for you, Robert, being a tenor, what kind of tenor are you? Because there are categories in tenor. Is it a
Mm,
Helden tenor, a dramatic tenor, or what
mm.
kind of tessitura are you?
So currently, the repertoire I sing, I guess, is what the Italians described as lirico pieno, so
Wow.
full lyric tenor. I'm sort of edging towards the lirico spinto
Wow.
singing. So this year I'm singing, really lucky this year to be singing a lot of the roles that kind of edge between those two camps, Pinkerton and Butterfly being one,
Wow.
the role of Faust in Gounod's Faust being
So the
another that sort of sits. You've got to still have lyricism and warmth to your voice, but you also need that sort of declamatory metal. Look, that's been a long time coming.
wow.
As I said, I started in as a real light tenor in the Baroque repertoire, singing Haydn, Handel, Bach, Monteverdi, all this kind of stuff. And Yeah, for me, I always knew there was something that I wasn't using that I wanted to try and access. And so when fate kind of necessitated it, I went back to studying the voice, studying the physiology behind it, and it left me with, yeah, what I'd say is this full lyric spinto kind of voice. So you still need a high C. In fact, you need a high
Yeah.
C sharp generally, but
L-
it's a slightly lower voice than a Pavarotti or something like this.
Yeah. Luciano Pavarotti used to say you can be a tenor if you can sing the C, but if you can't sing the high C covered, then you're not
Yes,
a real tenor. Is
I
that?
completely completely agree with that.
Yeah.
For me it's even more fundamental that if you can't sing an F sharp covered as a
Yeah.
tenor, high
Yeah.
F sharp. So this is just what we call the passaggio, or the break of the voice, where the voice wants to,
Going through.
you know,
Yeah.
crack over.
Yeah.
If you can't cover that, you can be a great singer, but in my mind, you're not really an operatic tenor.
Wow. I've always wanted to be a tenor. I do a bit of singing myself. I'm a basso
Very
profundo, so
good, very
I,
good singer. Yes.
I can go all the way to the A1, but everyone in the industry is trying to be a bass for some reason. I'm not sure why. Everyone's like, all the baritones are like, we're basses. And I'm like, you're probably not a bass. I wish I was a baritone or a tenor because we're limited in the fourth octave. Sometimes
Mm,
I can't get up to the D and E. It's
mm,
really
mm.
difficult. And most of, all the repertoire that I sing, Mozart, Verdi, I like a lot of Verdi.
Yeah, me
It's
too.
hard to get up there for me. I can go down, but as
Yeah.
Samuel Ramey said, he said, we're not paying you for the low notes. We know you can sing the low notes. The high ones that we're paying you for.
It's an unfortunate truth. I
Yeah.
always think that, the butterfly has this very, very difficult high C, and that you've been singing big in your upper range for about 25 minutes, and then you've got to pull out
Wow.
this high C. And every time it's less than perfect, you sort of feel like you've failed the whole job,
Wow.
and you have to tell yourself, well, I've sung 15 B flats and 25 A's before that time.
Fantastic.
That one C being not the greatest note in the world doesn't matter.
So, how do you get there? Let's talk about one tiny technical part before we go into a quick pop quiz.
Yeah, of
Joan
course.
Sutherland, the great Joan Sutherland, used to talk about support, obviously, and she actually taught Luciano Pavarotti how to use the diaphragm. So, how do you talk about explain support? Because it's a
Yeah.
phenomenon, it's a secret, it's not understood. Is it the diaphragm expanding, or is it? Joan Sutherland used to say, imagine pegs being pegged to your pelvis, and then
Mm,
bring the sound up, and
mm,
the air is here, and then it turns into vibration.
mm.
Everyone's got their own interpretation.
Everybody
What's
does
your
have their own thing. I try to think about the functions of the body that we already know how to do. So when I'm teaching, and I teach a lot of tenors, I have probably 40 tenor students across the world, and I love them dearly. And my teacher, a Spanish tenor called Rafael Vasquez, um, he must have 100 because he's one of the great tenor sort of problem solvers I've ever met. I always go back to things that things that the body does naturally. For instance, if we cough, if you put your hand, just below your rib cage and you cough, you feel the diaphragm pop.
the
You feel it
appoggio,
pop. Yeah,
the
you feel that
appoggiare,
appoggio.
yeah,
And so I try to connect
the half
people
cough,
with,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I try to connect people with those more primal
Wow.
feelings. Those who want to sing grand opera, it's physical. It's not,
Oh yeah,
you
oh
know.
yeah,
I feel like I'm lifting heavy weights, at the end of a long night, and yeah. So I just really try to connect people with those kind of feelings. Like, what does it fit? What when you let those muscles involuntarily do the work that they need to do, what does it feel like? So we can take that sort of feeling of the cough, or this feeling of that diaphragmatic kind of pop, that's
yeah,
involuntary. I think what we've got to realize too is the diaphragm's an involuntary muscle. When
yeah.
we take a breath, it expands and lowers. But we can't. The thing we can control is the respiration. So, I do try to tell people that we monitor the diaphragm, but don't try and tell it
What to do?
specifically what to do, because
Yeah.
it sometimes gets people in trouble.
What about Corelli talking about leaning back for the passaggio,
Oh
leaning
yes, well
back
you
for
can
the
and you can understand that, because
yeah,
the more kind of lean in your body, the more kind of prominence or distended feeling you're going to get in that diaphragm.
I
So I
remember.
usually take people from those kind of primal reflexes, and then just add it to a single staccato note. So if somebody can cough and then do what's called a glottal stroke, which is like quite a hard onset of the voice. So ah 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 ah, and they
The,
can feel the same feeling in that glottal stroke as they did the cough. That for me is the start of learning how to support. Now, doing that over a long legato phrase, that's another that's another trick again.
well, you've just mentioned two of the terms in our pop quiz there, Robert.
Ah, good. Well, we
Legato
better
and
get on to
staccato.
that.
Okay, so the first one is legato. And what is
Yeah,
legato? Everyone talks about legato. The line, what does it
yeah.
mean?
So legato is basically the connection of two notes, you know, uh, and generally people think of singing like they see a piano, so notes being separated by some kind of physical barrier, which is why when we're kids we all sing ah ha 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 ha. We sing in a very disconnected way. Basically, legato is the connection between the two notes. So for us singers, it has a lot to do with this breath. Ah, what happens in between those two notes is in my mind legato, and unless you master that, again, you can be a great uh, vocal artist, but it's not opera. Oh, I've just lost your sound, Hashim.
So Pavarotti used to call it sing between the
There we are.
phrases. Yes, singing between the phrases. Fantastic. I'll leave staccato till the end because you already mentioned staccato. Portamento.
Portamento. So that's the next step from legato. And actually, I think portamento and legato are very connected. That's basically when you hear a singer really sing through each note between a note. So if you've got a phrase, let's just take an interval like a fifth. Ah, ah, ah. When you hear every sort of little semitone between each pitch sort of slid
Fantastic.
down on, that's portamento.
Portamento. Squillo. The middle
Squillo, yes, that's
squillo.
something every tenor accesses with. Basically, that's a metallic kind of phenomenon of sound. It
Yep.
generally happens about 3,000 hertz in the if you look at the human hearing is about 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz when it's not when you haven't stood in front of rock and roll amplifiers for 10 years as I did.
Yep.
Um, um, so generally, squillo is something that happens for male voices, certainly around 3,000 hertz. That is kind of like it's a metal, it's a cutting power
Yep.
that
Cuts through the
tends to
orchestra.
help us over the orchestra. For
Yep.
me, yeah, for me, it's actually a function of we've got sort of two muscle groups in our throats that can help us control tone. The cricothyroid, which is these bands of muscle that help us stretch and sing high. So
Yep.
this kind of sound, and then this kind of
I need a bit of that. Yeah.
yeah, this kind of sound. This is controlled by these little pincers, I guess you'd call them, arytenoid muscles. And so I always think of those two things, the squillo and that arytenoidal sound, as being connected. But yeah, that's what gets us over the orchestra. That's the big difference. I
That's the
think
big
the
sound. Yep.
development of that is the big difference between a great pop singer and a great opera singer.
Yep. Messa de voce.
Messa
Messa,
di voce. Yeah, there's the sort of, I guess, the ultimate goal of an opera singer is to be able to sing every pitch in their range in this way. Messa di voce means to go from very quiet to very loud and back again. So
yep.
this kind of swelling of sound, and especially in the 18th century treatises about singing, this was considered the sort of sonic nirvana. If you could do that on every pitch, you were a great singer. So
Does it also mean you have a healthy middle range or a healthy middle register or
I think
a healthy
generally, if
sound?
you can do that on most pitches, you've got a healthy voice.
Maria Callas was a master at that, and who was the Spanish soprano from the
Oh,
Barcelona 90?
Cabaye.
Yeah, yeah, she
Yeah,
was also fantastic at that. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And look, it is easier I think, for a female voice to do up higher than a male's. You do hear great messa di voce in tenors. I mean, the big example for tenors is the end of Celeste Aida.
yes,
Uh, a good version, you hit the note nicely, which is a B. A great version, you can pull it back after
pull
you've
it
sung
back.
it loud. And I've heard that happen once in a theater, and people erupted. It
Ah,
was wonderful.
fantastic. What about coloratura for males versus females, or
Yeah.
the male voice versus the female voice?
Mm. So
Yeah,
coloratura is basically, this very specific kind of singing we hear. I'm doing it on my throat now because I have to be quiet in a tiny Hong Kong hotel room. But lots and lots of notes on one word or one vowel.
yeah.
Um, and again, this is something because of the size and the thinness of vocal cords is generally easier for a female voice to do. But I think all voices
Can
should
do it.
sing
Yeah,
coloratura. There's a great recording of Messiah with John Vickers, who had probably
yeah.
the largest voice of the 20th century, certainly for tenors, singing a very formidable, you know, Messiah tenor solos. So I think everybody should be able to sing coloratura.
It's really hard for the bass though. We've got one in Orvi Vidic Trion Fier in Mozart.
Oh yeah.
It's the Osmin. Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah,
no, no,
yeah. I
no, no.
know that. That's
Oh,
Jesus.
jam. And he comes when he comes down at the end. I'm like, oh, thank God for that. We're back down again. But all those higher notes are really difficult.
Absolutely.
Afondo. We got two more.
Ah, yeah. Now, a fondo is again an art that's being lost, and it's one of the most important things in my mind for real opera singing. This is
Yep.
the idea that the larynx, the voice box, this little box that holds our vocal cords and things like that, descends as we sing, and it's the difference between sounding like a music theater singer with your larynx up where you speak and ah, 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 getting this depth,
Yep.
That's been I think, the number one training that I had to do to change into this repertoire that I sing now is this idea of sort of getting the larynx down and
Yeah, I think
lowering.
I think the old school singers used to call it the U valve,
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
you need to tilt but I think that takes practice because for me to get there, it took me about 5 years
Yeah, and
to be able to tilt the larynx and have the sound go up easily and have that
absolutely,
attack.
Hashem, and
Yeah.
it's one of those things too that we live in this sort of we want to click our
Now,
fingers and do
yeah,
something.
we want it all
Now
now.
we can all lower our larynx because we all yawn, yeah. So
Yeah,
every time you yawn,
but
the
then
larynx goes down.
you gotta
But
keep
to
it there.
do that while sustaining a sound is a very different thing. And again, it actually takes years of
It does.
coordination. And that's why, I mean, the art of opera is in danger because we live in a society that's not patient enough to, also, with some of my students, I have a couple of great singers. Actually, I'll probably listening. Hassan, a young man in the
Hello, Hassan.
Melbourne Opera Chorus. He's 19 years old, and
Oh wow.
He's got a Puccini tenor voice.
Oh, fabulous.
But to get that low position
Yeah,
is very frustrating and it takes a long time. And
takes a
it's
long
just
time. I
there's
think there are nerves also and sort of bone structure that sort of eventually, when I was doing all the training, I nearly gave up at one stage because
mm,
I
mm,
felt blocked up here. And then I was watching a video by Corelli and he's saying all you need to do is put the sound here and
mm,
keep the sound supported down here. And
mm,
one day in my vocalise training, I felt like a pop here. It just something popped, and all of a sudden I could feel all the vibration in here. And I'm like, wow, I have
mm.
this little church in my head now that I'm in this amazing little space that I can control. And I
Yeah.
kept just walking around saying, oh, the sound's in my head. But it took
Yeah, yeah.
five years to get the sound up here, as
Well,
opposed
and
to,
Hashim, that it's a variety of factors too that limit us there. I don't think we generally allow people to be loud enough and sort of primitive enough. The sound is not, especially when you start, it's not refined. You know,
that's for
it's
sure.
if you scream at the top of your lungs, it's one step, sideways. And so I just feel like with a lot of our training, we ask for musicality and all this kind of these niceties
Yeah.
way too early.
Oh,
I
yeah, for
mean,
sure.
I was in chamber choirs and things like that as a young singer, and while it was amazing for my musicianship, my voice, which was probably already was probably naturally a fairly big voice if I just trained, just a voice first kind of training. I
Wow.
think it really hampered, my ability to get into my full sound. So it's a real paradox because of course we've got to be good musicians, but the voice has to be sort of it has to be like King Kong unleashed in New York City. It has to be able to just run rampage.
Yeah,
Um,
and you also
and
you also can't force it. It's like sort of you're sailing, you're guiding the sails basically. You can't
yeah,
force it.
yeah,
It just eventually
exactly. So
finds
yeah,
its
I
way.
think I love um, having gone through this sort of process of rebuilding and retraining and things like that. it's
Yeah.
such a joy to teach because I've done every incorrect thing
Imagine.
along the way, and
Yeah.
it's so really really wonderful to teach
Because we can't
singers.
see. It's all invisible. It's all inside of us. It's internal.
Exactly. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, can we have the pleasure of hearing a small aria or part of an aria before we go,
Oh, sure.
Rob?
Um,
Whatever you like.
Let me think what I can sing
We don't want,
in a little hotel room.
yeah, and we
What
don't
about,
want you to strain your voice because you have the performance coming up.
that's okay. What about a bit of Traviata? Dai miei volenti spiriti, il giovanile adore, e la temprò col placido sorriso dell'amor.
Fabulous. I absolutely love that. Let's have another podcast soon and I'll try to sing a little bit with you next
Yeah,
time.
we'll do
How's that?
we should do a
I'd
duet.
love that. I would love that. And there's so many singers that want to meet you, by the way. So I've told a lot of people about you from this side of the world.
Oh,
So
fantastic. Well,
we'll
yeah,
organize that soon.
I'd love to come over to Cairo.
It's a huge
It's some
industry here, by the way. It's quite
Yeah,
big
it's somewhere
this
I'm
side of the world.
really
Yeah,
really hoping to visit, and really hoping to work with all the wonderful singers in Cairo. So yeah,
fabulous.
let's do it.
Thank you for your time, Robert. It's been amazing. We've been here in Hashem's podcast with Robert Mcfarlane from Hong Kong. He's from Melbourne, Australia, but he's in Hong Kong at the moment. See you. Bye.
Thanks so much, my friend.
Bye.